Let's bring in our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who is in Syria, in the city of Qamishli in northeast Syria. Alex, very good to talk to you today. What is happening on the streets today? What is the mood like?
Well, the mood is one of trepidation, but also a great deal of excitement and hope as well. And where we are now is a place called Security Square in Qamishli in northeast Syria. And where we are will give you an idea of just how rapidly, how quick this change of power has been. Behind me, you can see this was a regime base, but in a matter of hours, government forces melted away and simply disappeared. It's now been taken over by the Syrian democratic forces behind me. They now control the base, but it gives you an idea of just how quickly things have changed here. Now, people have also been telling me that in the past they would walk along this street, they'd walk past the regime base, and they would feel very, very scared because, over the years, people have been arrested, taken inside this base, and they've simply not been seen again. So there is that kind of optimism, there is that hope that Syria is moving to a better future. If we turn over here, you can see in the centre this roundabout. Now, of course, it's not there now, but in the centre was a statue of Alex Assad. That was the father of Bashar al Assad. But people, when they came out and celebrated on Sunday morning that the regime had left this place, they tore it down, smashed it up. We're told that people took bits of rubble away, presumably because they don't want the Assad regime ever to be pieced together again. But it kind of gives you an idea, a sense really, of the feelings that people have. But as well as the kind of domestic issues, the possible suggestion that there may be infighting amongst the different militias, and there are a huge range of militias across Syria, there are also regional pressures as well, as countries outside surrounding Syria try to shape it in their best interest. We're seeing what's happening with the Israelis, and then to my north, the Turks as well. We are getting reports, worrying reports, that there is continued fighting in Manbij, which is near the Turkish border between Syrian democratic forces and Turkish-backed militias. Now, people here worry that that could descend into bigger and greater fighting. So, although there is a lot of happiness here, people are really glad that the Assad regime is gone, that chapter in Syria's history is now over. There is a good deal of anxiety about the future.
Indeed. And Alex, you're travelling into Syria, and of course many Syrians across the world are now saying that they are going to be able to go back home. And we've seen a lot of people already crossing the border from Lebanon. Where are these Syrians going to go? What has happened, for example, to their homes for the last 15 years?
Well, that's a really good question, and it is one that Syrians who are living in refugee camps abroad are asking themselves if they haven't started that difficult journey back home. And that question simply is, what will we find when we go back? Will our homes still be standing? Will our neighbours be there? Will anything that we can recognise still be there? So they are asking those questions, but people are starting to make those journeys. And of course, they will go back to areas that have absolutely been decimated by a really brutal, more than a decade of really brutal, bloody civil war. So that's really, what people are grappling with at the moment. So as well as, and it kind of feeds into this, as well as people being very excited and optimistic about the future, there's also a degree of grief as well for what people have lost in this war.
And Alex, what about the actual logistics of life at the moment there? With any change in government, of course, concerns about things like the general infrastructure, electricity, water. What kind of supplies do the shops have?
Well, Syria has been hollowed out by years of war, the economic situation, which kind of led to the protests in the first place in 2011. And what was known loosely as the Arab uprising, there was an economic dimension to that, as well as what people were chanting at the time, liberty and democracy. It was always also about bread. So the economic situation in Syria is particularly hard, but there's also another thing which is quite striking about it. If you actually look around this city, it is functioning. I mean, the cars are on the roads, there are good lorries moving around, people are going to their jobs if they have them. So life on one level seems quite ordinary, it's quite routine, people are carrying on as best they can, but underpinning all of this is this momentous change that has happened to Syria. And it's really quite hard to overestimate, or overstate rather, how significant that change is. I mean, the Assad family have ruled this country for decades. Hafiz al-Assad, of course, turns the country along sectarian lines and effectively turned it into a one-party dictatorship before handing the reins over to his son Bashar al Assad. There were hopes, of course, when Bashar al Assad took the reins of power that he wouldn't perhaps have the stomach that his father had for cruelty and oppressing the population, but in many ways he proved to be his old man's equal in all those senses. But things are carrying on as normal. I mean, people are getting on with things as best they can. But that said, there is this fear, really, about what could come next. People are very aware that this is a very dangerous moment for the country.
Indeed, Alex, and we've seen that the prisons are being emptied, and many of those people inside those prisons, critics of the Assad regime. But there will also be concern, won't there, that this also could lead to general lawlessness. Who is in control?
Yeah, I mean, that, of course, domestically is a fear that law and order will break down. Here, where I am in Qamishli, this is an autonomous region of Syria. It's a Kurdish majority region. The Syrian Democratic Forces are very much in control of things, and they are providing the security. But there are other parts of the country which have been, for a long time, fairly lawless in the desert areas of Syria. But of course, the fear is that the opposition groups that have taken over the country, moving, of course, as they did very rapidly from Idlib province into Aleppo, down, moving south through Hama, Homs, and then on to Damascus, that there will be friction between those groups and a breakdown which could lead to, a longer civil war, another outbreak of war. There aren't too many signs of that happening at the moment. The sense is that they are managing to keep a lid on things. They are being quite pragmatic in their approach to law and order. But at the back of people's minds, there is always that fear, that possibility that could happen.
And what of the Syrian forces themselves? I mean, obviously, the speed that the rebels were able to take Damascus over the last 2 weeks, this march down to Damascus, that they succeeded very, very quickly. The Syrian forces didn't put up, it seems, any great opposition. There have been, we hear, uniforms abandoned by the side of the road, the building like the one behind you abandoned. But where have these forces actually gone? Have they just melted back into the general population?
Yeah, I think people have blended, people who served with government forces have blended back into the population. The speed with which all of this has happened has been staggering. It's not just the Syrian people, not just the government, of course, of the now deposed President Assad that was taken by surprise. Regional actors have been surprised, the international community has been surprised that a war that most people thought was at a stalemate should suddenly reignite and end in such dramatic fashion. Just think how quickly all of that happened. In the space of days really, they made that movement out of Idlib and then into Aleppo and then down towards Damascus. But you're right, it's certainly here, the picture that we're getting at this regime base is that in a matter of hours, the soldiers that were stationed here just took off their uniforms and left. Where exactly they went, we don't know. The guess is, of course, that they went south, but we don't know the answer to that. And we have seen pictures as well of government soldiers by the side of the road, taking off their uniforms and abandoning them by the side of the road as they put on civilian clothes. So the hope is that those people will go back into the civilian population. The opposition groups are promising that there won't be any reprisals. But at the moment, it appears that they have just melted away into the civilian population.
Which will obviously cause anxiety for the population, and anxiety too, Alex, for those countries neighbouring Syria because of its position and because it does border so many countries, including Lebanon, which is obviously just been embroiled in fighting with Israel, which it also borders, and Turkey and Iraq. You know, there are many other countries that are also now today looking at what is happening with great trepidation.
Great trepidation, but I think it's also right to emphasise that countries are looking at the situation here with also the possibility that actually the outcome may be better. They're not necessarily coming to that conclusion, but certainly there is the possibility that things could be better. Take Turkey, for instance. They, of course, have a great deal of anxiety about a Kurdish power base on their border, which they believe and claim could be used by Turkish separatists to springboard attacks and cause instability within their own country. But at the same time, Turkey is home to millions of Syrian refugees, which has had a destabilising effect on the country. If those people could go back home and build a prosperous Syria with a good economy and a good future, that would be a good thing for Turkey. Similarly to, if you take the Israeli position, with Bashar al Assad here, the centre really of the axis of resistance. Weapons, of course, were being funneled from along the Shia crescent from Tehran up into Lebanon. All of that may come to an end, and you may have a security situation the Israelis will be looking at, which is actually better for them than what they had before.